today. We will talk about the media and a little bit about politics and sport, some things maybe about, I hope, we have time to talk a little bit about legacy issues, and I don't think we'll have time to talk about the future, a big topic, but I have the slides for you, and when I put the slides on for yesterday, last night and this morning when I was doing some work on them, I made some changes. So I replaced the ones for May 14. There's just a few changes. So if you did not look at them, then there's no problem. You have the new ones. And the ones for yesterday and today, they're pretty big files. So I didn't have time to turn them into PDF and to compress them. So if you don't want to download the big files, if you wait either this afternoon or tomorrow, I will convert them to PDF, compress them, and make them smaller so that it's easier for you to download them. Okay? And so today we will think about all of the images and the narratives that we receive as sport consumers. And we will also look at the process through which sport becomes represented to us through the media. And we are influenced by media images and narratives. This is not a one-way process. We give our own meanings to the things that we see and hear in the media, but the media, the narratives and the images in the media set parameters for our thinking. We think different things inside those parameters, but they are setting some of the boundaries for us in terms of the kinds of things that we think about ourselves, how we give meaning to other people and events, how we form our ideas, and how we envision the future. So this photo is from the 2012 Games in London, and I thought it was a good representation now of how the media is so pervasive in Prolympic sports. And they look for certain things. And when someone is expressing their emotions, like this runner, I can't remember which runner this is, but she's from the UK, from England.
Jessica.
Okay.
And it's Leo now.
Okay.
Because she got married.
Okay. So she was expressing emotion, and this is one of the things that is emphasized in the representations of sport. If people with cameras from the media companies see someone that's expressing emotion, they focus on them. And the editors inside the studio, they are picking from maybe for the Olympics, like at NBC, they maybe have 50 cameras, and they're picking from 50 different cameras and the image that they want to show the people who are watching. So there's many choices that are being made in terms of choosing what will be represented to us as media consumers. And so the media content is always being edited, always being represented by those who control the media organizations. Now, this is not a conspiracy. They're trying to provide us with what we want, but they're also trying to provide us with the things that will keep us watching. And so they're making many decisions. And those decisions are based on one or a combination of goals. And one of the goals is to make profits, to boost the ratings, to boost the number of people who are consuming the event in the media. Another one is and this is not explicit in many cases, but they're interested in some countries to influence cultural values. So in the old Soviet Union, for example, I have friends who were sociologists in the old Soviet Union, and they would tell me that the broadcasts of the Olympics in the Soviet Union would be emphasizing communist values, collective values. They wouldn't be emphasizing the same things that I saw in the United States. So the narratives in the United States would emphasize competition, individualism, but the narratives in the broadcasts in the Soviet Union would emphasize collectivism and the community and doing things for the good of the state, and because they were influencing cultural values. They were presenting the narratives and the images that they felt were consistent with their values. And the same thing is done in the United States, and the same thing is done in Brazil. And sometimes it's very subtle. If you study the media, then you have to look very carefully to find those kinds of things. If you live in a country that has public television and public radio, then there is a commitment to providing a public service when they present sport. So in the United States, we only have one public television station, and it would rarely, it would almost never present sport. But in Brazil, I know you have 3 public television stations. More? Okay. So, yeah, so the kinds of images and narratives that you see are very different from the kinds of images and narratives that I see. Because I'm seeing them through the commercial media. And you're seeing them, in many cases, not all, in many cases, through the public media. So you are more likely to have representations that provide a public service. And in some cases, the editing decisions by people are done to enhance their own status and power, or status and reputation as media people. And you know, I haven't really worked a lot with media people, but I've worked a little bit. And I get interviewed sometimes by television people, and I think, you know, they call me and they say, we'd like to interview you for, on this particular topic. And I say, well, we could do it by Skype. And they say, oh, no, you know, because Skype doesn't give the high definition, it doesn't give, we can't control the background. So, you know, they bring a camera to my house, or I go to a studio where they have complete control over things. And, you know, the lighting is just right, because they don't want a picture that someone else in the media would say, this is not a good technical picture. You know, they're interested in their own personal reputation as camera people, as producers, as directors. So that also influences the representations that we get. And sometimes we don't even notice those. But for media people, they say, oh, that's a beautiful shot, the way it's framed and everything. But we are amateurs when it comes to media, so sometimes we don't even notice those things. But they're being done for this reason. And then some people in the media, they're artists. You know, they are committed to their craft, and they see their own work in the media as a form of art. And so they want to present things that will be aesthetically pleasing, that will be defined as good artistic representations of things. So there's many different goals that influence the representations that we see as consumers of the media and as consumers of sport events. So, when we think about the media, we also have to think about power, because those who control the media they decide, in many cases, what kinds of events they're going to cover and what kinds of images and commentaries are presented in the coverage. And when they do this, they play a very important part in constructing the frameworks that we use to define and incorporate sport into our lives. So, for example, if you're a child and you don't have an opportunity to go to the actual event, like a football game, you can't afford tickets. So the only thing that you can do is see the matches on television, and you see the highlights. So what happens is, and I've seen this with children, when they see the highlights, they sometimes in their own play, they will mimic the highlights in their own play. You know, they'll try to score a goal just like someone else scored a goal. And they're influenced by what they see in the media. And in some cases, if they don't see the game in person, they are actually mimicking the representation, not the real game. So children are learning about sport now, today, through the media. And many, not just children, many of us learn about sport through the media. And that's an important point, because sometimes if you don't know anything about a sport, you wouldn't spend the time and the money and the energy to go to a real event. But it's easy to watch it on TV, and you can learn about the sport on television. And then, if you really like it, then you can invest the time and the money and the energy to buy a ticket, go to the event. So you might not say, I'm going to go to Rio to watch the World Surfing Championships, but because I don't know anything about surfing. But if you watch the surfing championships on television over the past few days and through Saturday, tomorrow, and you listen to the announcers, and you start learning about how they keep score, and what the challenge is, and who the important surfers are, and what kinds of waves they like, and all of those things. Then you say, oh, I really like the surfing. Next time there's a big surfing championship in Brazil, I think I'm going to go. So the media provide a socialization process for people when it comes to sport. And so that's an important factor. Also, as the people who control the media make programming decisions, they oftentimes, this is not in public television, but in commercial television, they see the audience simply as a group of people that they can sell to a sponsor. And that's their major goal in commercial television. They want to attract as many people as possible, because their whole broadcast is based on the premise that they can sell the audience to the sponsors, who will pay for the commercial time and other sponsorship money. So there's a big difference between commercial media and public media. Okay. So media sports are social constructions in a way, and the media representations, like I said, are shaped by the camera people and what they choose. Now, the camera people, this man, he has very little power. He's got his headphones on, and the directors are telling him, we want this kind of a shot. We want a shot of a beautiful woman sitting in the front who's a celebrity. So, for example, I'm trying to think of the last event. Oh, the big boxing match. Pacquiao versus Mayweather. In the United States, it was sponsored by two media companies, HBO and I forget the other one. But they had a big meeting, and And one of the big things they negotiated was what celebrities would be shown by the cameras sitting around the ring. Because HBO wanted their celebrities from their TV programs, and the other channel wanted their celebrities from their programs, so that they could talk about their TV programs and have other advertisements for their company. And they had a big debate about you get 3 celebrity shots, we get 3 celebrity shots, but you can only have 5 seconds on each one. We want 10 seconds on ours. And so all of those tiny little things are being negotiated when, in connection with the representations. So the camera people respond to the directors and the editors who select the images from various cameras. Okay, so, and of course, when we watch, we think, oh, we're seeing the real event. Well, we're seeing the event that the directors and the producers want us to see. So, for whatever reason, different goals. So, now, I think this, when we talk about the media, I think one of the most interesting issues today is how the new media are influencing what's the whole representation of sport. Because now you can go to YouTube and you can see one of your friends doing sport, and because another friend did a video. And so now we can create our own media content. And that is a major change. The changes that have occurred over the past 50 years in major mainstream media have been dramatic. The kinds of cameras, the number of cameras, all of the technical things. But now, I think the change from mainstream media to more and more viewing of new media is one of the most revolutionary changes that's occurring in the media. And it's occurring across all media, but it's occurring in sport. And in the past, it was very primitive, because you had your video camera and you had your VHS tape, the big tape, and people would record the skateboarding, the skiing, snowboarding, other kinds of alternative sports especially. And then they would have their video, and they would put it in the mail, and they would send it to their friends, and their friends would watch, and then make a copy and send it to their friends. So it was very, very primitive. Now, we know that you can just put it online, and the whole world can see it. So there are many young people now who are developing reputations as being very good with cameras, being very good with editing, because they have some money and they have Apple technology where you can do very good editing with the software and the Apple hardware. And it looks professional. And young people are actually developing reputations. And some of the media companies are interested in hiring some of those people. So, because they have so much experience just doing everyday kinds of video. So, and we are able to see kinds of sports that we could never see on commercial television, or even public television wouldn't be interested in this. So the new media are very important in terms of changing the way people consume media content. And if you know children now, 10, 11, 12 years old, many of them don't consume mainstream media in the United States, for example. When my 14-year-old granddaughter comes to my house and my 16-year-old, they sit down and they are on YouTube the whole time. And they're picking what they want. And sometimes they're watching their friends' YouTube videos. And they'll call me over because one of their friends is a singer and they have this nice video, and they want me to see her or him singing their song. And many of these videos are pretty professional, so they're good. So and they also are filming their school sport events, and so if they have a favorite player, they film some of the things that player is doing and put it on YouTube. Maybe only 10 people watch, but nevertheless, that's a new way to consume media or consume sport. So is that happening in Brazil too? Are more people? Does anybody film any of your sports that you are playing? No? Can put it on?
It's interesting because the soccer teams and the athletes are using the YouTube to make his our channels, like Anderson Silva. Before his last contest, he had a TV show on the internet. He showed his program training.
Okay.
And for the media, it's a challenge to what can we do different, because he's showing what he wants to show and what the media will do different of that.
Yeah.
That people can follow in the Facebook, on Twitter, on the YouTube, and the Sociedade doesn't need it anymore, the media, because
Right.
and the soccer teams here in Brazil start doing that, but not in the same with the same results yet. But
But it's starting to happen in that way. Yeah.
here at Curitiba we have a soccer team, Atlético, that they have a voice that they don't talk with the media.
Oh, really?
No, just with the official channels, with the website or his president letters, emails, or schedule interviews.
Yeah, that's a very important point, because it's changing. The new media is not only allowing people to produce their own media, their own images and narratives, but it's also providing sport teams and athletes with new ways to connect with fans. So they don't depend on journalists anymore. The journalist used to be the middle person between the athletes and the teams and the fans and spectators. But now the teams and the athletes don't need the journalists, because they can go directly to the fans. And that gives them much more control, because in the past they couldn't control some of the things that the journalists would say and present. And some of the journalists would say things and present things that they didn't like. So now they say, and this is interesting because in the United States, the teams and the athletes cannot stop talking to the media. The bosses, the owners, and athletic directors, they say you must talk to the media, but we will train you on how to talk to the media. So, when we see the interviews, everyone's saying the same thing. They just are like a script. And so sometimes when they switch to this particular approach, where they eliminate the journalists, the spectators think, oh, we're getting the direct truth from the team and from the athletes. But that's not true either, because they are very careful about how they edit what they say and what kinds of images that they provide. So even though the spectators, the fans think, oh, we're on Facebook, we get the real information from our favorite athlete. Well, and sometimes the athlete is not even writing. The messages on Twitter and Instagram, providing the images on Instagram, it's the agent. It's a special person that's been trained to be the voice, to be the person who creates the images and the narratives that we think are coming directly from the athlete. So, you know, when you're making, when your persona as an athlete is making you $6 million a year, you have to be very careful. You want people to buy your jersey, you want people to watch your matches. So you don't want to make mistakes when you put something on Twitter or on Facebook. So in some cases, you have the money to hire someone to make sure that the right messages get put on Facebook and Twitter and the other social media. Okay, so beyond creating our own sport realities, the athletes and teams can create their own realities to present to the rest of the world. Okay. Do you have fantasy sports in Brazil? A fantasy sport, I don't want to take time with this, but in the United States, there's fantasy football. And fantasy football, real quickly, is a group of us gets together and we pretend that we're owners, okay, of a team. So we create our own team. We pick up players from different teams in different positions. Yeah. You have something similar, and then you have points. If your player scores a touchdown, you know, you get so many points. If your quarterback throws a pass, you get so many points. You know, if there's certain defensive plays, you get so many points. And then we compete against each other. You know, my team has this many points, your team has this many points, so I win. And so people invest, they pay money to get into these leagues. And the NFL now has their own fantasy league. And so people pay money to the NFL. And then at the end of the season, the people in the particular league that wins the game, maybe they get tickets to the Super Bowl. But now they're winning money in some fantasy leagues. So now the politicians don't know, should we regulate this? This is a form of gambling. And how do we regulate this? So it's creating big challenges for politicians. But meanwhile, the people who watch fantasy, who are playing fantasy football, for an example, they don't care what team wins the game. They just care how their athlete, if they have an athlete from that team, they care how that athlete performs. So, so now the NFL has a special broadcast. It's called the Red Zone broadcast. So you don't even watch a football game anymore. You just watch the Red Zone. When a team gets close to scoring a touchdown, and they're in Pittsburgh, you get that coverage. When another team in Los Angeles is close to scoring a touchdown, then it goes to Los Angeles, and then back to New York, and then down to Florida. And you never see a whole game. You're just seeing the scoring plays, because that's where your fantasy players are getting points. So it's created a completely new way to watch sport. And it's created a new way to be a sport fan, because no longer are people Denver Bronco fans or New York Yankee fans, or they're fans of individual athletes that they own, in quotes. So it makes people feel important. I'm an owner. I own these players. So, I can do a better job than the coaches, because I'm picking my players. They don't know how to pick players. I know how to pick players. So, so it's a completely new way to consume sports. So one of the big questions related to new media is, will new media democratize social life and democratize the media? Or will they become tools to expand corporate capital increase consumption and reproduce dominant ideologies. Will it just be more of the same thing, or will it actually be a democratic alternative to the media that we have today? So people can use new media in personally transformative ways, but most people right now don't use them that way. They use them simply to complement the mainstream media. So they check the scores, they look at the highlights on their smartphones, and they're just using the new media to complement the mainstream media. So it's not a big change. It's just a little addition. So, and we don't know where this new media is going to take us. It's difficult to predict. So, because the big media companies, they're concerned about this because they don't want people creating their own media content. So the big media companies are trying to control the internet in ways that will minimize the democratization of the internet. So, because right now, the internet is wonderful, at least in our countries, because it's open, we have access to everything, but some of the big companies, they want to buy priority online. So Google would like to have more bandwidth, and so that when you do a search and when you want to watch, consume online content, Google wants you to go to them first. But that would stop the little companies from providing material on the internet. And so the little companies are saying, wait a minute, we don't want Google to have that kind of power and priority. And in the United States, this was a big surprise. Our Congress agreed that the internet should stay open. I thought that they were going to side with the big corporations and give them more power because they donate to their political campaigns and they have lobbyists who help write the legislation. But Congress was for keeping it open in the United States. So, and it would affect things around the world too. So, now here's another interesting point that some friends of mine and I are starting to study esports. And we are thinking of having a conference at the University of Colorado in Colorado Springs on video sports and the people who play video sports as e-athletes. So, because the gamers who are playing the video sports, they are committed to their play. They give considerable time to it. They create their own narratives and stories within the limits of the software, of course. But they do that when they play sport-themed video games. They form new social relationships with people they don't know in other countries. They play against them in multiplayer games. The games involve people from a diverse set of backgrounds and cultures. And the sport-themed video games provide very different experiences than consuming mainstream sports. And some young people are doing this now, and you maybe have heard about this. South Korea is the leader of this. And they have competitions, e-sport competitions. And they fill stadiums with 50,000 people. And millions of people watch these events around the world. They watch them online. And in the United States, there are 2 universities now that are giving athletic scholarships to e-athletes. And they are going to sponsor e-sport teams. And then they will compete with other universities in e-sports. And So this is a big change. And all of the parents who said, you're playing too much video games, this is terrible, you're gonna ruin your life, and now their son, usually their son, not their daughter, but usually their son says, I've got a scholarship to college because I'm an E-athlete. So now that's very, very rare, but it's starting to become a little more popular. So we are trying to put together a conference, and we want to invite high school students and have them compete. And then we can watch them compete and study how the competition occurs. Because we need research on this. Because right now we say, people aren't playing sports because they're all on video games. And, but we have to start studying how video games are being played, who plays them, under what conditions, what kinds of impact it has on their lives, how they integrate those games into their lives, because right now we're just guessing about the impact of these things. So we think it's just destroying the lives of young people. But some of the research shows that that's not true. In fact, some research shows that the young people who have played video games become better surgeons as doctors because they have fine motor skills that they've been able to develop over the years, and their surgical abilities in terms of, because a lot of the surgeries now are done where you don't even look at the body. You're looking at a monitor, and you're operating little robotic arms. And the young people who have played video games, they're much better at that. So, maybe if I need surgery, I want someone who played video games to do my surgery. So, yeah.
I think there's another point. I see that in Brazil, and other people told me the same. Because to many young people, they're interested in learning English because they play video games.
Okay.
So that they can interact with other people. And that, I have close people that work like this, and then they have a good vocabulary and a good speaking because they talk because they talk to each other through the online games.
Yeah.
So probably this is a point that you don't see in the US, but in other parts of the world it can be important because of the games.
Yeah. But in the US, the US is privileged in the sense that English is the dominant language. But and by the way, I appreciate you listening to my English. This is a privilege for me to come to Brazil and talk in my native language. And you are doing more work than me because you're trying to understand my English. But in the United States, when it comes to the video games and the video sports, young people in the United States are making friends in other countries around the world. And these are people coming from families where maybe they would never have the money to travel to another country, but they're able to talk with people from other countries and develop relationships. So we need to study that more and see how it's affecting people's lives, because I don't have the slightest idea about how it's changing lives. I think it's changing lives, but I don't know how. I don't know in what ways lives are being changed. So we need to answer these questions about the dynamics of playing video sport games. And I remember when the first video sport games came out, the race cars, that they would do. I was teaching a course in popular culture. This is 15 years ago. A course on popular culture. And we were reading a book on video games, one of the first books ever written. And none of us in the class had played these games. It was being played by younger people. And so I asked them to bring, if their brothers or sisters played the games. So we brought in 4 12-year-olds. And we set up 2 televisions, not flat screens, the old televisions. And they played 2 people against 2 people. And And we watched them for about 45 minutes, and then they sat in the front as a panel, and we asked them questions for almost an hour. And these 12-year-olds were teaching us about the future, basically. And they were telling us about how they were playing the games, how it influenced their friendships, and whether it interfered with their studies or not, and so on. So there's many questions we need to ask about video games. And the other related question is, how about virtual sports? Now, some of you maybe haven't read about this, but I've read a lot, as many articles as I can find on virtual sports. And now there's new technology being developed where you can put on a helmet or goggles, and you will see a different reality. And you can negotiate that reality with physical movements. So, for example, it's possible to be in a room with a stationary bicycle, okay? And you can put on your goggles, and this bicycle is programmed. It's set up to be coordinated with what you see with the headgear or the goggles. And you can be on the Tour de France course, the same course that the racers are on, and you can actually even see one of the racers next to you in some cases. And when you're going up a hill, the bicycle changes so that the tension in your legs has to increases. And but you see all of this beautiful scenery in France, and you're basically riding the Tour de France, and you're doing it in one little room. So now this technology is not developed sufficiently yet, but I think in 50 years, maybe more people will be virtual athletes than real athletes, like we say now. So that it's possible. In fact, I've done this one. I've never snowboarded in real life, but I've done it virtually. So I got on a snowboard and had the goggles on, and the snowboard was programmed so that it would, you would have the feel of being on the slope that you were seeing. And I wasn't very good, but it was an interesting experience. And I can see that some young people would say, hey, this is great, because depending on what everything costs, it costs so much to go snowboarding, but instead of flying on an airplane, going to a ski resort and all of this, I just put on my goggles, go into the room, get on my board, and I ski in Aspen, or in Switzerland, or in New Zealand, wherever I want to go. And so virtual sports, I think, is going to be something very big in the future. So right now, Google is perfecting this technology. Google and one of the other big companies. I can't remember which one. And they're having kind of a race. Who will be able to copyright or patent the technology.
Another question from Larissa.
Yeah?
She asked me to ask to you. She's interested in how in the United States, if it's difficult, especially for people from physical education, to study and they need to justify too much why they are studying esports, mainly not virtual sports, but video games.
Yeah.
I believe, considering mainly the idea that it's not a sport, so why people in physical education should study, or the resistance that there is.
Yeah, there is resistance to studying it, but it depends on how you define sport. So, it involves physical skills. It involves a certain amount of movement, but not the same as in other sports. But some people say, we always debate about the definition of sport. Is bowling a sport because you can smoke a cigarette and have a beer when you bowl? So, is golf a sport because you can smoke a cigarette and have a beer? And some people say, I have some friends who say, any activity that allows you to smoke a cigarette and have a beer while you're doing that activity cannot be a sport. But, I think instead of defining sport in an exclusive way, I think I'm much more open to using the definitions that people use. If people are calling themselves e-athletes, and this is e-sports, then I'm going to be interested in it. I'm not going to say, I'm the expert. I know what a sport is, and this is not a sport. Meanwhile, the whole world changes, and I become irrelevant. So I am interested in how other people are defining sport. Now, in physical education, there are practical issues. So if you go to a big physical education conference in the United States, one of the things you will see is a room like this, and there will be a big screen, almost this whole wall. And then the whole room will have technology on the floor. And the students can pick particular music, and that music lights up different parts of the floor. And then you have to, go to the part that's lit. So I've seen students do this, and you get 50 students who are moving all in unison, and they're very, very physically active, and they love it because they're able to pick the songs, the music that they can exercise by. And they don't see it as exercise. They see it as dancing, they see it as a game, and they don't even define it as exercise. But they're getting more physical movement than they would if they were playing basketball or football. So, and the programs, the software for the lighting on the floor is set up so that you learn lateral skills, forward skills, backward skills in different combinations. So you're learning physical literacy while you're doing it. You're becoming more physically literate. So now, the big problem for physical educators is this costs a lot of money. So, and schools, only private schools are using this now. There's very few public schools, except the ones in the very wealthy areas, that are using this. But if the price comes down, we will see more of this kind of technology used in physical education. So in the United States, physical educators are thinking about the future of physical education and how this kind of video technology can be used to keep people moving more. So it's not like Wii, the old Wii where when I first played, we would play tennis and we would be moving all over, and then, some 14-year-old comes in and says, I can beat you, and I say, I don't think so. And then they sit there and they go, they're not moving at all, I'm moving all over the place. And so we thought we would be the answer, it would get children moving, and then we found out that children can figure out a way to be good without moving. So that's, we don't know how technology is going to be used all the time. But one little example here, this is from an NFL video game. And the images in the NFL video games now are so realistic that you could see the real game and the video game, and you would have to look pretty closely before you could know which one is the real game. And in fact, so many people are playing the NFL game, the NBA game, the NHL game, Major League Baseball game, that the technology and the representations in the video game are now being copied by the directors and the producers of the real game. So they are using filters now on some of their cameras that will create the impression that you're watching a video game, right? So they're actually copying. It used to be that the video games would copy the real game and try to make it look as real as possible. Now the real games are trying to make those games, the people are trying to make those games look like video games. So, these worlds, the video world and the mainstream media worlds, are starting to merge in an interesting way. Okay, and just, you may know some of this, but the graphics and the images in the video games, you know, they're very close to the televised games. TV producers now use special filters to make the televised games look like video games. And athletes now are using video games to train. Now, not in all sports, but race cars. You know, the Formula One drivers and the NASCAR drivers, what they do, because their competition schedules are so busy, sometimes they don't have an opportunity to do the kind of practice that they need to do. So what they do is they buy the video game for Monaco or for some other race course, and those race courses are exactly the same. So they practice where the turns are, and, you know, when to slow down, when to speed up on video before they even get onto the real track. So, so sometimes video games are being used to train. Some children today, and I want to study this, they're being introduced to sport through video games, not through real sport. So what if a 4-year-old starts playing soccer, football, you know, with a good video game, and they start playing video, and then at 6 years old, they go out onto the soccer pitch, and a coach says, "This is how you play soccer." And they say, "Oh, no. I've been playing soccer for 2 years on video. So this is what I think soccer is," because they've learned a completely different approach to the game, because they've learned soccer through a video game, not through real experience out on the pitch. So, so if you're a coach, is this going to create a challenge for you when children are playing the video game and then going to your practice? Because they're learning different things. So are coaches going to be able to use this in a positive way, or is it going to create a problem for them? We don't know, because we haven't studied it. So there's so many things to be studied related to this new technology. And because children are not only being introduced to sports through video games, but when you're good at playing video games and sport video games, it becomes a source of status. So if you go to a university in the United States and you live in a dormitory, some of the people who have the highest status in the dormitory are the best video game players. Because in the dormitory, at a particular time, 10 o'clock every night, there's big challenges and competitions, and you know, if I'm winning all the time, then I'm the most popular person in the dormitory. So, at least among a certain group of people. So it's changing relationships. So, we talked about these. You know, will your grandchildren be seeing sport in a completely different way than you do? Is a big question. Virtual sports can offer a range of experiences that current sports don't. We can make sports safer. We can actually play sports and have no concussions. Maybe we can eliminate knee injuries because we're constructing virtual sports that are designed in a way not to push the knee in certain ways. I don't know. Will communities use tax money to, instead of building a park or a recreation center, they'll build a virtual sports center? And I don't know. but all of these things will be questions that you might live to see. I won't. But we're spending too much time on the media here, but you know, one of the big questions in media studies and sport is do sports depend on the media? And people's sports, no. You know, there's no dependence. People's sports do not depend on the media. Although some people would want me to qualify that now, because not many, but some people's sports are using smartphones in order to communicate with people, to let them know that everybody's going to play football at 2 o'clock over on this field, and then people can get together. It's kind of like a mob football game. So there's the new technology, new media are being used to complement, to help people's sports exist. And the commercial entertainment sports, they absolutely depend on the media. If it weren't for the media, they would not exist in the same form that they do today. And because the media coverage attracts attention, provides information about results, and television coverage remains the most important factor. If you want your sport to grow, the most important thing is to be able to sell television rights, because then you get the revenues that you need for your sport to grow. So all the new sports that were people's sports in the past, some of them are changing in a way to become more Prolympic so that they can sell their sports to the media. And the big example of that that I've been working with is Ultimate. You know, the Ultimate Frisbee, the team game. And Ultimate, I loved Ultimate because there's no referees, people enforce their own rules, the games are very, you know, the strategies are spontaneous, and the game is very playful, and I like that kind of a game. And I know people who play Ultimate, and I've given presentations at their conferences, and one of the presentations was, how do you preserve the element of play in Ultimate as it becomes more and more Prolympic? Because they're very worried about that, because that element of play constitutes the very spirit and core of Ultimate. So they don't want to lose that. And they don't want to lose that playfulness and that joy. But that's a big challenge. And of course, the money, I won't go through this because it's the US and you can look at it if you want in the book, but the money for the TV rights for the big sports has increased exponentially. So you can see now that in 2013, $5 billion the NFL gets from media companies. In 2016, it will be closer to $6 billion every year that they get. So this is how the NFL survives. And to a lesser extent, how every major mainstream sport survives. And it's the same with the Olympics, okay, in terms of the amount of money. 2012, the IOC got $1.2 billion to sell the London Games to the media, $1.2 billion. And in Vancouver, I don't know about Sochi. Data are hard to find in Sochi. But in Vancouver, they got $820 million, almost $1 billion, for the television rights. And you can see what's changed. You know, in 1960, $2, but not much. So in a half a century, we've gone from nothing to $1 billion. And it's affected not only the sport organizations, but it's created global celebrities in a way that we never had before. So everybody knows who you're looking at there. And, you know, this was a little girl from Russia. And, you know, she happened to come to the United States and go to the IMG Academy with a particular coach, and Nick Bollettieri. And Nick Bollettieri was able to help her train, and now everybody in the world knows who she is. So, so the media has created global celebrity, and it's increased the money. You know, Tiger Woods, $80 million a year, not last year, but, you know, previous years. Lionel Messi, 80 million, you know, David Beckham, 50 million. And one of the issues that I have here is, these are windfall profits, you know? Maybe we should have some kind of a tax on that money so that we can build more sport facilities for children. Wouldn't that be one way to fund some sports in certain countries? Is to have Lionel Messi give $15 million, when he makes $80 million, he would give $15 million to the children in Spain or Argentina, whatever, for building new soccer pitches for them. So, but that's not a popular idea. So, you know, we've had big changes now where people can make so much money they can't even count it. And it's obscene, is what it is. And maybe there should be a way to have some of that money go back into the sport rather than just benefiting individuals. So now Messi would say, I have my foundation, and I'm doing this kind of work and that kind of work. And okay, that's good, but that's, you know, maybe there's other choices that could serve the common good better. That's a difficult debate to have. And the media, do they depend on sport? In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. I mean, most media don't depend on sports. But in the United States, and I don't know about Brazil, daily newspapers often have sports sections that are very important, and a lot of people wouldn't buy the newspaper if there were no sports in it. So, and television companies, the commercial ones in the United States, their biggest profits are related to sport. And the reason that they have profits is that they know who is watching sports. They have clear demographics. And if you want to sell things to men, then what you do is you advertise on sport. Because men don't watch some of the other programming on television. And if they do, they might record it and fast forward through the commercials. Do you do that here? Not so much?
We have some.
Yeah. See, I never watch any television that is scheduled on their schedule. I record it, I watch it on my schedule, I watch no commercials. But if you watch sports, you have to watch it live, and then you have to watch the commercials. So that's why sport is the most valuable programming content for commercial television. So, okay. Yeah, ESPN obviously depends on sport. So it wouldn't exist without sport. And yeah, I use this photo because I like, it was just a coincidence. I was at this game, and I don't know what this advertisement was, but Kobe Bryant was just accused of rape in a ski area in Colorado. And he came to play on the Los Angeles Lakers. And all of a sudden, I can see up your shorts. I was in the same frame as Kobe Bryant, so I took a photo. But one of the big issues today is how the new media affects players, because now they don't do anything that's private. You know, people can record things. You know, they can get in trouble for what they do. Coaches are getting in trouble. People are having affairs, and now somebody has a video of it, when in the past, and it's on YouTube. So, you know, so new media is changing how athletes think about their private lives, how coaches think about their private lives, because everything is open to being recorded. And you don't know, because the smartphones are so good at being discreet. So, and even one of your friends, you know, if you're in a group and you're a celebrity athlete, and you trust all of your friends, okay, but what if one of the media people says, I will give you $20,000 for 1 minute of your friend doing something that maybe is a little bit of a problem? Then, can you trust your friends then? You know, so, and that's happening. So, yeah, we've got to say about something about this. So, when you consume the sport in the media, it's men's sport, okay? On television, 10 to 1. 10 hours of men's sports for every 1 hour of women's sports. And even that is a little bit of an exaggeration. It's actually less for women's sports. And same in the newspapers. If you take the newspapers on television and news and put it all together, in the United States it's 6 to 1, but 6 hours of men's sports for every 1 of women's sports. But it would differ in other countries. And in the coverage, heterosexuality is assumed, and people don't even talk about homosexuality in sport. Not that it should necessarily be the news, but they're always talking about heterosexual relationships and going to heterosexual clubs and all of this. And if you have an athlete that's going to a gay club, they don't cover that. So, although that's starting to change in the United States now. And a few male athletes have come out who are currently playing as gay. Many of the women players have come out as lesbian. And one of the big issues was that one team advertised to the gay community. The WNBA team said, many of our fans are gay, so we should advertise in the gay community. And they did an ad, and they got 2 of the players from the team who were lesbians to do the commercial. And the WNBA said, get that off the air. We don't want the WNBA to be known as the lesbian league. So there's this debate now in the United States about, should we erase homosexuality at all from all coverage in the representations, or should we acknowledge that this is reality? So, because right now we're not seeing reality when it comes to that part of what's going on in people's lives. So, so the coverage produces dominant ideas about manhood, but some of the coverage is doing a good job of changing ideas about femininity. When you watch the Olympics, not just gymnastics or figure skating, but if you watch the Olympics, you see women who have bodies that do not fit the body ideals that are promoted in the media generally in a culture. You see a diverse range of body types. You see strong women, you see highly skilled women, and that has an impact on little girls. They have a broader sense of what femininity can be in their own lives when they see that. So, although the media companies, you know, when they show Maria Sharapova, you know, they don't show her before she has her makeup on. You know, they don't, you know, and she is always dressed in a way that's a little bit provocative, and it fits with sexualized images of women, but that's starting to change too. So, so I think that the media sports for women have been progressive more than they've been a source of reproduction. Okay. And the media organizations are all male-dominated, male-centered, male-identified. You know, that's part of the problem. If you look at the sport journalists, very few are women, and very few are minorities, ethnic minorities. And so it's all white men. And you know, that in itself is not a problem, but there may be other vantage points that would be good to have to cover sport. And I remember in one of my classes, I invited the sports editor for one of the Denver Post, the big newspaper in Denver. And we asked him, and this was a few years ago, one of my students asked him, do you hire women in your sport department? And he said, sure, we would hire women. And she said, but you only have one out of 20. She'd done her homework. And he said, yeah. And so she said, well, why aren't there more? And he said that when we will hire women, you know, if they're good sports writers. And she said, well, what's a good sports writer? And he said, well, it's people who can write the way sports have been written about in the past. And she said, and who did all that writing? And he said, well, men. And she said, well, in other words, if I write like a man, then you will define me as a good sports writer and maybe hire me. But what if I write in a different way, in a new way? And he had a problem with that. So it's like, how do you define who's qualified? In sport, if you do it like a man, you're qualified, which automatically disqualifies. In fact, if you do it as a white man, you're qualified. So if you do it as an ethnic minority or as a woman, then maybe you won't be defined as qualified. And they say they're making objective personnel decisions, when actually their personnel decisions are grounded in subjective ideas about gender. So why don't we take a 15-minute break and then come back and talk about legacy.